So first of all, little back update. I'm getting around much better. Back pain has greatly subsided. I had some nerve pain there for several days um, after the back pain had kind of faded, and in doing my stretches and doing the inversion table and walking as much as I can, the nerve pain is pretty much gone away, which is great. I would say that I actually feel like 85%, but I'm at that stage where just because I feel like that doesn't mean I should act like that, because discs in your the discs in your spine, they're very slow to heal and regrow. They will heal and they will develop scar tissue and they will kind of take care of themselves, but it takes like 6-7 weeks for that healing process to happen. So even though I feel much better, I still have to be really careful so I don't re-injure my back. And it's the hardest thing ever, because now that I'm feeling better, I want to do stuff and I'm getting really bored. You know, I had to give up my main hobby other than photography, which is golf. I won't be doing that for quite some time. And that means that I'm bored. I'm real bored. So it's given me time to do other things and work on some projects that I've wanted to do for a while. I did record another premium tutorial, and that'll be coming out next month with the 5-day deal. So yeah, let's see. We got greens from Richland, Washington. How's it going, Jim? I see Nathan Goldberg. How's it going? I got John Campbell smoking some pork butts and enjoying some Nick Page. Nice. Yesterday, I actually smoked. So I guess that's the hobby that I've taken up this past year. I just got a new barbecue. So now I've got a Traeger pellet smoker, which I've had for a while. It's kind of my, baby step into smoking meat. But then I just got a nice grill. So I've been smoking stuff. Yesterday I smoked some pork belly burnt ends, which if you've never had them are the most delicious thing ever. It's like meat candy. It's delicious. So I've been smoking a lot. I cooked a tri-tip the other day. It's my new thing. Lapine, Oregon. Jim Hughes, do you plan on visiting Scotland again anytime soon? Very much want to. I've loved Scotland. I felt arguably more at home in Scotland than I do where I currently live. There's just something about it. It feels like home to me. I felt the same way in Ireland as well. I think that is definitely my natural habitat as a Scotch Irish Caucasian. I guess that makes sense. Hi, Nick from Wellington, New Zealand. Just getting through COVID isolation for a week and love. Oh yeah, COVID, isn't that fun? Did you have very bad symptoms? When I got COVID, it knocked me on my butt, but that was a while ago, and I feel like most of the COVID strains, from several months ago were a little bit more vigorous than the ones that are going around now. So yeah, ask me some questions, guys. Give me something to talk about. Otherwise, I'm just going to babble. I'm struggling with my Wacom tablet and editing. Any pointers? So I'd be interested to know what you're struggling with. I know that when you're using these Wacom tablets, like this guy here, they like sliders and little things like that can be a little bit finicky. So like for example, if you're in Lightroom and you need to change the value of the exposure slider and you want to be very precise, what I often do is I'll click on the word exposure and then I'll use the plus and minus keys to slowly move it up or slowly move it down. The other thing is, to get used to a Wacom tablet, you just got to put your mouse away. Use your Wacom tablet for absolutely everything. I don't even own a mouse, so I browse the web with my Wacom tablet. All the video and audio editing, all Wacom tablet, and you'll be amazed at how much quicker you get better with it. You were right about the essential Photoshop for wildlife. Hope the back's doing better. Glad that it's working for you, man. Glendon Beach, Oregon, checking in. Yeah, so have I ever considered making an in-the-field photography tutorial? Yes, I absolutely have. It's actually something that I've talked about with one of my friends who's also a tutorial creator. I won't give away the person in case it never happens, but it was something that we had talked about doing to do together, like a joint in the field, like a true start to finish, where we talk about the scouting of the trip, and then we go out and we do the trip and all of the compositional stuff and why we're shooting it the way we're shooting it and all of that. And then all the way through post-processing, and do that as a joint effort, I thought was a really good idea. It's really hard to plan for because you have to, carve out a pretty big chunk of time to make it happen. What's the name of my upcoming tutorial? So it's going to be, what is it called? Creating impactful black and whites. So I know that I'm not well known for black and white photography, but I felt like, especially with my particular workflow, utilizing luminosity masks and the way that I use luminosity masks to control dynamic range and to draw the eye and everything, I felt like I could make a pretty good black and white tutorial. So it's a tutorial course all about focusing on black and whites and how you can utilize luminosity masks and dodging and burning and all of the little tricks and things that I do, how you can use those to create really dramatic, impactful black and whites. Any plans to any plans for storm chasing workshops? Tentative plans, although they've kind of been put on hold a little bit because I didn't get to go down and scout and practice essentially as much as I wanted to this year. It doesn't look like there's going to be storm chasing workshops available next year because I really want to get more education and more time chasing under my belt before I feel confident enough to, lead a group of unsuspecting photographers out in the path of giant, dangerous storm cells. I plan on doing it with another storm chasing, incredible photographer friend of mine who's way more knowledgeable than I'll probably ever be about storms. But we just didn't get the opportunity to shoot together, mostly because I was kind of going through a photography funk and I just didn't carve out the time to go chase, unfortunately. My video on moment, movement, and energy was profound and hit home. I'm really, really glad. Any additional tips on putting that into practice? So the thing about when you're really hunting for moments and particular, that decisive moment when you're out shooting is that implies that you are very alert and aware. There's a saying that used to float around when I was starting photography. The saying was F8 and be there. And I think that saying was more about like the art of like just being appreciative for the fact that you're there. So many of us, we get wrapped up in the technical side of things that we're wrapped up in what we're doing and we don't fully appreciate the beautiful place that we're in and we don't stop and smell the roses, so to speak. But that same kind of concept can be applied to trying to be aware and acknowledge the moments that are happening. Because if you're not really aware and looking and observing your surroundings, you're not going to notice those little things that could be a decisive moment. Like when you're photographing seascapes, if you're not careful, it just looks like wave after wave after wave, and they all look identical. They all look the same. And you're not noticing the fact that every 15 minutes, a group of pelicans flies by, or some of the waves actually spill over this rock in a really interesting way. The art of being aware and observant of your surroundings is something that we can all get better at. I don't care if you're like a super practiced, professional, world-renowned landscape photographer. Like even that person can be more aware and be more alert and acknowledge their surroundings better. And that's going to mean that we're happier as photographers because we're actually, absorbing the place that we're in. But we're also going to be better photographers because we are aware of our surroundings and we're aware of all those moments as they pass and all of the possibilities of those moments and what potentially could make it into a photograph if you're aware enough for it. little things that I'll do is, I will try to find a particular rock where the water is spilling over when I'm shooting seascapes, and I'll be looking for that. And once I get that, then I know that I need to shift gears, and maybe I can get those seagulls as they swoop down in front of the camera. And for that, I'm going to need a totally different set of settings, because this 1/5 of a second is not going to work for a fast flying seagull. So I have to change my settings. And just having the mental awareness to acknowledge that dramatically changes, how you can shoot. Oh, I see my camera has gone small. You can see what I'm looking at, though. Let's go back to OBS Studio. Go like that. I suck at OBS Studio. Okay. I think that worked. Full screen. Am I going to be full screen? Sorry about that. I think I'm full screen now. Let's look at more questions. Good approach from the storm chasing workshops. Yeah, I want to do things right if I do them at all. I don't want to be a person leading people into dangerous situations and do it in an unethical, stupid way. Would I run a workshop in Scotland or meet up with a hobbyist to show? Yeah, I would absolutely. Well, first of all, I would need to team up with a good Scottish photographer that knows the area, and then I could kind of co-lead something like that. That's always my approach when I'm teaching in a place that I'm not knowledgeable of. When I don't have that local knowledge, I want to team up with someone that does have that local knowledge. That way we're providing value. I can provide some photography knowledge, but I wouldn't have the knowledge of the location. So I would team up with somebody for something like that. But I've often thought that it would just be fun to, when I travel to a particular place, to just do like a little informal meetup. Whoever wants to show up and hang out, we could do that. I think it's fun to get groups of photographers together like that. Hope my back is doing better. Ever shot in the Great Smokies? I have not. I've never really shot on the East Coast. I've never shot anywhere other than Acadia National Park. And that was for like only a few days. I very much would like to see a good, proper fall color, on the East Coast, because you guys have fall color that is not anything like what we have. It's a very different type of photography. I very much would like to see the Smokies, although I hear it can be a zoo. And I'd also like to see some of the cypress swamps of Louisiana and Texas. I think that'd be beautiful as well. Who are my top 3 YouTube photographers to go out in the field with? So are we talking about skill or people that I enjoy? Like, as far as YouTube photographers, I think top YouTube photographers that I really respect their work, Michael Shainblum's probably top of that list. Let's see. Will Patino. Is that how you say his last name? Will Patino is a New Zealand photographer. He's got a really small YouTube channel now, but he's got a massive Instagram following, and he is such a good photographer. You should, let me make sure I'm saying his last name right. I envision the last name, but I've never actually said it out loud. So yeah, it's Patino. William Patino. He's this guy. Let's see if I can show the camera that. So William Patino is an incredible New Zealand photographer. I'm actually going to talk with him tomorrow for my podcast. And awesome New Zealand photographer. You should definitely check him out. Definitely top 3 photographers on YouTube. Who else? And the F4 guys, they're all like, I think that Adam is just a fantastic photographer for composition. Adam can find composition in areas that I would just give up. He's really good at finding compositions when the light just isn't doing much. That's when I struggle, honestly, because I'm such a light-driven photographer. Yeah, I guess those would probably be my top 3. Let's see. Any tips on Vero? Getting more likes and views. I'm new to it. So Vero, for those of you that aren't aware of what it is, it's a social media app. It's been out for a while, and I personally prefer it big time over Instagram. You can view your images full screen. You can click on the image and then rotate it, and there's no cropping. It's just really, really good. So with Vero, the thing about Vero is there's no algorithms. And on, say, like on Instagram or on YouTube, when there is an algorithm, it means that the app itself will recommend new users to other people that have no connection with you at all. So sometimes you can leverage that and you can find users just because one of your posts happens to get popular or whatever. And you can kind of gain eyeballs that way. But on Vero, there are no algorithms. And that's awesome because it means that you only see the work of the people that you follow. The downside is that the only people that ever see your work are people that already follow you. So gaining traction on an app like that with no algorithm can be a bit of a challenge. One of the things that I recommend to people is to go out and to interact with people, become friends with people. You know, it's kind of like real life. You have to kind of network and create those spider webs of, you know, of networks. You have to network with people. So going out and commenting on people's work and chatting with people in the comments below photos, things like that, is just a good way to start good, organic, real friendships and relationships and connections. And connecting with people rather than just following someone, you can also ask to connect with them, which means it's kind of like friends on Facebook, where if they connect with you or they accept your connection, that means that you're following them and they're also following you. And that helps a lot with networking. Sometimes it doesn't work so well if you're trying to connect with someone with a big following. So like, it's a nice problem to have, and I'm not complaining, but because I have a larger following, it means that I am just inundated with new connection requests, which means that my eyes kind of glaze over and I just kind of give up. And then I don't go through that very often just because I get like thousands of them, and that's really hard to go through. But that's one of the downsides of, I guess, having a larger following is that, you know, sometimes like my email inbox, it just like when I announced that I had back problems, I had so many people reach out, and it's so humbling to know that people have so many well wishes for me. But at the same time, it gets overwhelming because when you try to reply to, replying to 5 emails, not a big deal. Replying to 200 starts to get a little overwhelming. And then you're just like, you know what? I'm just going to close my email inbox for today. I'll come back to it tomorrow. And then you don't come back to it tomorrow. It's kind of funny. Scott, thank you so much for the super chat. I struggle with landscape photography here in Florida. That's why I concentrate on wildlife. You live in a great place for wildlife. Birders flock to Florida because you have so many birds that migrate through your area. So I think that's a great thing to do. You also have a lot of beaches, although I know that you don't have a lot of the, sea stacks and rock formations out off your coastlines, but you do have a lot of storms. So that would be one of the types of seascapes that I would try to shoot in Florida, would be to try to time those shoots with like a thunderstorm rolling through. Although I imagine your thunderstorms are pretty damn scary. John Drummond got some of my best images from, you're talking to somebody else. Sorry. Chris Snyder, proper tags help getting views. But yeah, it's tough when you have organic growth. Organic growth is the most challenging type of growth because it's real. There's no algorithm to help you. Somebody trying to connect with somebody on Vero feels like I'm pushing myself on them. Yeah. It has to be real. It has to be organic. One of the way that I gained my following is I just talked about the fact that all of us have some kind of following on some other social media website or app, and let those people know that you're also over here. And just letting those people know that you're there, like, that's one way to get it started. You can't just go to a new place and not let anybody know, because then it's just going to be crickets. And that's one of the, and I hate to say this, but it's true. When you look at, people on Instagram or on YouTube that have these massive followings, it's because a lot of them whore themselves out. And I guess I've whored myself out. For me, like the whole way that I got a following at all is I just started talking into a camera and putting videos on YouTube. And then I started a podcast, started ranting into a mic and putting it out in the internet. And a lot of my early podcasts and my early YouTube videos were just not good. And I started doing that stuff long before I ever should have, because I didn't, looking back now, it's pretty cringeworthy. I just didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Although I tried to come at it from a humble way where I wasn't full of myself. Because that's one of my pet peeves, but still, it's still cringeworthy. But everybody that gets a following that is fairly large, there's some element of marketing themselves. And it doesn't mean that it has to be some kind of super phony, fake, trying to do whatever is popular in the moment. That's one of my absolute biggest pet peeves and annoyances with, in the whole influencer thing or big YouTube channels. They're all so damn fake and phony. There's nothing that I hate worse than some photography YouTuber giving you five top tips for creating dynamic photos, and then their photography sucks. And there's so much of that. There's no correlation between the size of an audience and the quality of their content. The only true correlation is the size of their audience and how much they're willing to market themselves and how much they're willing to cater to those stupid algorithms or those stupid trends that are just fads. Some of the biggest followings out there were built on just following the trends and doing what's popular and being sellouts. That's my music side coming through. Okay, I should probably dip into the questions and comments. Do I have plans for visiting the Middle East in the future? I would love to. Man, there are so many dynamic, beautiful landscapes like in Pakistan and so many of those areas. And, as a person living in the United States, we are so naive and ignorant of so many of those landscapes simply because that's just it's not a part of the world that we ever get to learn much about, not in an American school anyway. And I think that once my son is a little older and doesn't need pop around all the time, I think that I would be much more willing to go, just simply because there's that element of danger and risk involved when going to areas that are not necessarily the best of friends with America. I want to save that stuff for once my kid's a little older and he doesn't need pop around anymore. But absolutely, there's so many beautiful areas that just look like Utah, only so unexplored. Well, maybe not unexplored, but very, very, very much, I'm trying to say photographed way less, I guess is the way I would say it. Nick Page, love the F4 series. What are must-shoot locations for someone doing a West Coast trip? Oregon coast, for sure. California redwoods, for sure. Olympic National Park. Mount Rainier National Park. Columbia River Gorge. Those are probably the must-see things when on the West Coast. Hello from an American living in Iceland. Thanks for your recent posts here. Must be difficult. It's extremely inspiring what I'm doing. Man, I would love to live in Iceland. Iceland feels like home away from home now that I've been there like 10 times or so. I'm starting to be able to pronounce things. It's kind of nice. Icelandic is the hardest language to learn officially because it's not phonetic at all. Now let's see. There's a guy to block. Hold on. Let's remove or hide user from channel. Okay. Any plans for a trip to New Zealand? No plans, but it's definitely somewhere I want to go. Hi from Spain. How's it going, Ricardo? Should we photographers have a hobbyist? Should we photographers have a lobbyist so we can influence political decisions regarding light pollution in our cities? And Starlink ruining our night photography, bird migration routes. It's something to consider. I mean, there are already people very involved with trying to combat light pollution because it's really such a new concept. There wasn't really ever a push against light pollution until like maybe the 90s is probably when it started. It was about the time that we started being able to photograph the night sky that we realized, holy cow, we can't even see the night sky because all the damn lights. There's lots of places that have started to put a limit on the amount of light pollution that a city can put out. And there's other countries where it's a very it's very actively controlled. The Starlink thing, I don't know about that. I think that's not going to be something that we can fight against, honestly, because it's really the only people that are annoyed by Starlink are us night photographers and astronomers. People that want to be able to see the night sky unimpeded. We're really the only people that even talk about it. Yeah. Let's see. When particularly a non-photographer asks if your images are photoshopped or they look surreal, what's your feeling or response? Yeah, that's tough. Like it usually, if a non-photographer looks at something and they're like, that looks like a painting, or that looks so surreal, sometimes there's some truth to it. So rather than just automatically being upset and offended by it, you might use that as an opportunity to kind of look at it with fresh eyes. Because in my particular past, when somebody had said that, there was some truth to it and they were kind of right, especially if it's a non-photographer saying it. Sometimes it's just that you're showing them something that they can't normally see with their eyes. You know, when a non-photographer looks at a night image and it's got the Milky Way in it, they're usually like, whoa, because they can't see that with their eyes. They don't have the benefit of having long exposure with their brains, right? Same is true for any kind of water movement. When you start to blur water, a non-photographer is like, whoa, that looks like a painting. And it's just because they don't understand, but they can't see that. They can't see in that way. So you're showing them something that they can't normally see. But if it's because, the processing is very extreme, the colors are so vibrant, it hurts my eyes, or the sky is so dark, sometimes there's some truth to it. And so, when you do get those comments, it's a good opportunity to kind of stand back and maybe look at your work with fresh eyes and be like, is this guy right? Or is he just a dickhead? Because sometimes it could be both. Yeah, International Dark Sky Association. They're the leading point of light pollution issues. Hey, Nick, I know you've shot a lot of NFL games. Have I ever shot professional golf? No, I have not. It's something I very much want to do, though. I've shot semi-professional golf. So I've shot the Pacific Northwest Open, which is a pretty big tournament. Shot, I guess, a couple of those, but I've never shot like PGA Tour. But I would very much like to. Favorite lens for astrophotography? The Sony 14mm f1.8, really hard to beat. It's really sharp, it's really small and light, and 14mm at f1.8 lets in a ton of light. What photo lab do I recommend for metal and canvas? So I used to say Bay Photo, but I don't really anymore because I've started to have some meh experiences with them. And so here's a little plug for a really awesome tutorial course. So Sean Bagshaw has a course all about producing better prints. And one of the things that he illustrates in that course is he shows like the soft proofing comparisons. Like he loads the ICC profiles for several different print labs, and Bay Photo is one of them. And it's amazing how poor their printer capabilities are. And it's kind of got me thinking differently about which print labs I use. So I actually just yesterday, or maybe it was today, I ordered a print from HD Aluminum Prints. They're a company out of Vancouver, Washington, and I'll let you guys know how that turns out. Ordered a big 48-inch long metal print, and I'll let you know how that turns out. What was my favorite storm I've ever captured so far? And for someone looking to start, do I have any advice and resources to look it up and learn? So a good resource is called the Skywarn. So there's a program called Skywarn, and it's through the National Weather Service. Excuse me. And it's like an online course that you can learn about different types of severe weather. There's a YouTube channel that I've been learning a lot from, and it's called Convective Chronicles. And essentially it's just kind of like talking about like when there's a severe weather alert for the day, he kind of gives a little forecast for what might happen and he goes through all the scientific stuff. He talks about, the hodographs and the SKU-T charts and all of that stuff. And you can learn so much on a channel like that is really in-depth storm chasing stuff. So Convective Chronicles is a good resource. Also, there's so many great YouTube videos just about the science of convection. So convection is the science behind a cumulus nimbus growing. So you have a cloud and then it grows really tall, produces a thunderstorm. That's called convection. And the science behind that, there's so much good, valuable information to learn about that. Just on some YouTube videos. And once you learn that stuff, then you can start to see it in everyday life. Then you start to track it on your own, and you learn pretty quickly when that stuff happens. Yes, Convective Chronicles. He is so good. It's a great YouTube channel. Who am I talking to? Yeah, so 3 years ago, I made a video about Vero. Have I been using the app more since then? Yeah, so I just started switching over to Vero again. Started posting there again probably 2 months ago. And so on Vero, I probably have 25,000 followers or something like that. On Instagram, I have like 175,000 followers. So massive difference in the size. But I get nearly as much interaction or more on my Vero account with only a fraction of the size of the following. And it's just such a better place to share images now because it's a way that there's a whole bunch of people have been flocking to it for one. So it's a very vibrant community. Everybody's kind of there right now. All the landscape photographers that I know are. And the interactions that you have there are just so much more meaningful. Like people actually take the time to share meaningful insight on your images. Sometimes if you ask for critiques, people critique them. There's no bots. There's way less spam. There's no stupid TikTok videos with random music that interrupts it. And it's chronological. So if a person posts twice a day, you're going to see both of their posts. The app itself doesn't have an algorithm to filter out your posts from other people's eyes. They're not controlling what your followers see or how much of your posts will actually get seen. So that because there's no algorithm, like the interactions are more plentiful and more meaningful. Do I think photographers will ever have an obligation for disclosure of heavy manipulation when sharing? I kind of say, yeah. There's a time and a place, right? Like, it depends on what was done and how the image or why the image is being shared. So, like, one of the things that I've actually had a public spat with another photographer, workshop leader, instructor, educator guy. I had a public spat with a guy because he was sharing an image of it was the Alabama Hills, if anybody's familiar with that. And he was sharing these images as marketing for his workshops. And in these images, he was taking a 14 millimeter wide foreground and blending it with a 300 millimeter background. So essentially it was making Mount Whitney like fill the entire background. So it was 300 millimeter background with a 14 millimeter wide angle barrel cactus in the foreground. And I left a comment saying that, you know, a lot of these people, what are you going to say to a person when they pay for the workshop, they show up there, and the location looks nothing like this photo that you use as marketing for this workshop? And in those kind of situations, I definitely feel like you have to at least say, by the way, this is an extreme focal length blend, because this is not how it looks in reality. But there's other times where like you don't have to say it if it's an exposure blend, or maybe like even a really subtle focal length blend where you're blending like 16 millimeter with a 24 millimeter. That's not distorting reality, because it's so subtle that it's more like kind of how we perceive it. But when you start blending things like, here's a 600 millimeter moon with a 14 millimeter frame, or here's a Milky Way dropped over, you know, an Iceland image where you can't even see the Milky Way in real life because it never gets dark during that time of year. Those kind of things are just so fake. I feel like they definitely should be at least mentioned. I'm kind of anti sky replacement, simply because for me personally, it would rob me of the enjoyment of chasing those conditions for real. You know, and I'm also one of those guys that, like, if I'm going to do an astrophotography image, I don't want to take a nighttime sky and blend it with a daytime foreground, because that just feels like cheating. Because it's cheating, because like you're working way outside the bounds of what a camera is capable of, to the point where it's just like, man, that just feels lazy. Because you could drop a Milky Way into any composition, and yeah, it just feels like cheating. So yeah, that's my little soapbox. I don't know. Like, everybody kind of has that line in the sand that they have to draw for themselves. Like, I will do this, but I won't do that. And that line in the sand is different for absolutely every photographer. And it changes throughout time. I remember when I first started learning Photoshop, I was like having a great time, like dropping a sky into a frame and trying to salvage a shoot that sucked. And then, you know, after a while, I didn't like it when a person saw this image, but then I photographed an amazing sunset, like at a later date, and they questioned that image that was real because this image wasn't real. So I made the line in my sand that, like, you know, I care more about people believing what I post than I do about just posting good stuff all the time. So because I want that believability and that, you know, the reliability in my work, I abandoned ever doing sky replacements. Okay. So yeah, ever shoot infrared or thought about it? I've thought about it. But I don't care enough about it. Like, it all kind of looks the same to me. You know, like infrared always had, I don't know. I've never seen infrared photography that was like, wow, that's amazing. It's always like, wow, that's just really infrared. You know, look how bright those leaves are. That's all it ever seems to be to me. And so I've never really seen infrared photography that blew me away. So I've never really been inspired to do it myself. Yeah. What are my thoughts on newer Canon mirrorless bodies such as the R5 versus Sony and Nikon? Any specific predictions for the Sony R4 going medium format someday? Why or why not? So when the R5 came out, I almost switched to Canon, because I think if the lenses were smaller, I would have switched to Canon. The problem for me is that, first of all, like the workhorse lens would be the 15 to 30. What is it? 15 to 30. And it's big and heavy. And I didn't like that. And then like the telephoto lens, you know, my current setup is 16 to 35, 24 to 105, and 100 to 400. And that would have to be replaced with a 15-30, the 24-105, and then the, what is it, the 100-500, or is it 150-500? And that lens is a beast, and I would never want to pack that around. So like the size of the lenses were kind of a deal breaker for me. That, and that I always have to have a video camera. And right now, my main camera is this Sony a7S III with a 20mm f1.8 on it. Super small and light setup. But what's nice about that is it takes all the same batteries. I can mount all of my lenses from my main kit on it as well. So if I want to do like, you know, some telephoto video, I can. And like I thought about maybe keeping the a7S III for video and then having an R5 for stills, but I don't want to have two different camera systems. And there's just not a good Canon small light video setup, because if you're going to hold something out like this, or if you're going to carry two camera setups, they need to be kind of small and light. And there's just not a small light video lens, like a wide prime, on the Canon side yet. So that's what's kept me out. I think the A7R5 is probably going to have updated sensor. I think the update, unfortunately, is going to be very minimal. Probably slightly faster frames per second, slightly better focusing system, a few more megapixels. That'll be about it. I wish that they would improve the rear LCD screen, make it so the touch screen is actually like Canon. You know, the Canon has awesome touch screen functionality, as Sony is just awful. It sucks. The rear screen on a Sony just feels low quality and looks low quality. Like the picture styles seem low quality compared to Canon. I wish that they would improve those things, but I bet they don't. But I'll buy it because I'm stuck. You know, there's a big part of me that wishes that I was in on another system, but I don't think that it's so easy to get addicted to small and light camera setups. Because like when I'm on a workshop and someone picks up my bag, they're always like, "Oh, that's so light compared to mine," and they're always like a Nikon or a Canon shooter, and it's simply because of the lenses. It adds up over time. What are my thoughts on Lumenzia versus TK Actions? Love my luminosity mask tutorials. So TK Actions is, it's starting to, like, the newest version of TK Actions is so much better than previous versions. It's really fast and it's really simply laid out. The actual multi-mask or rapid mask, whatever he calls it. That panel is just so simply laid out. I really, really like it. I think Lumenzia, the thing that it's got going for it is that the interface doesn't change and the tutorials are free. And I think that for a lot of people just getting started, Lumenzia is way easier to learn. But I think for the more advanced users, TK Actions is definitely more powerful, simply because it does so much. When you start learning the CX panel and or the combo panel and all the different things that it can do, and you start implementing that into your workflow, it really speeds stuff up. But even when you don't use that, when you're just using just the multi-mask panel, it's faster than Lumenzia now. So it's gotten faster, it's gotten simpler. I really like it. I reached out to Tony Kuiper after I updated to the newest version and complimented him. I feel like he's finally really nailed the user interface. And then I begged him, don't change it next time, because the biggest downside to TK Actions is that every single time it updates, the user interface changes. And I feel like that's a bad thing for people to have to totally relearn a panel. And that's one of the biggest benefits to Lumenzia, is that he keeps it the same. That way you learn it once, plus you get free updates for life. That's a big deal. You don't get that with TK Actions. So TK Actions is definitely more expensive, but it also has that expense of a steeper learning curve. Like sometimes you have to relearn it even though you know it, because the user interface changes. Let's see. Love my R5. Yeah, the 100-500 is a beast. When the conditions or the scene doesn't look promising, do I still try to work it and get the best image I can, or just wait for the right scene? So I think there's definitely, like, when you're out on a shoot, it's especially like as you've, kind of been doing photography for a while, it's really easy to get a little too picky about when you pull the camera out. Like, there's a lot of times where my camera just stays in the bag. And I feel like that should not be a source of pride. I think that is more likely it's evidence of snobbiness, right? Like, just because there's not a portfolio image there does not mean that I could not benefit and grow from working a scene. Because sometimes when you have to work really extra hard in an area where there's just no good, obvious photo there, even if the conditions are bad, just the practice of going through the motions and working a scene is so good for your compositional skill set. Working a difficult scene is always a valuable learning opportunity. And I think that too many of people like me just are like, meh, there's nothing here. I'll just wait till next time. Or, the light isn't how I like it. Whatever, I'll just shoot next time. And I don't pull the camera out. But the times that I do pull the camera out, even when the conditions are not what I want them to be, or the location isn't set up the way I want it to be, those are the times that I actually grow. And I think I would recommend that, even for people, like, regardless of skill level, to always shoot in those situations, because, practicing is applicable and beneficial no matter what it is that we do. Doesn't matter if we're basketball players or photographers or knitters, practicing, especially practicing in a difficult situation, is always beneficial, and it's always an opportunity for growth. Okay. No, it's just that I'm a demeaning photographer. Is that Rick trolling? Have I ever tried Joel? No, I have not tried his actions. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. What's the name of his panel? Mirrorless or DSLR, what are the pros and cons from my experiences? It used to be that DSLRs were better focusing. That's no longer true. Mirrorless are better at focusing. Mirrorless is a game changer for looking through your screen and seeing exactly what your image is going to look like before you ever take the photo. So, I mean, for that reason alone, mirrorless is just so much easier, and it's so much better in the way that, like, it removes chimping. You never have to take an image, look at it, and then see what you took, and then take another image. There's no more guessing. And it's so nice, especially when you're shooting through your viewfinder and you see exactly what your exposure is going to be before you ever take the photo. So for that reason, mirrorless, that's a huge pro to mirrorless. Mirrorless tend to be smaller and lighter because you don't have that mirror box. So that's another pro. Con on the Sony system is definitely, like, sensor dust. I wish so much that they would have that shutter close. I know the A1 does, but A7R4 does not. I wish the shutter would close when you take a lens off or when you turn the camera off, because sensor dust is such a big problem, especially if you're shooting much video or time lapse. It is a pain. Let's see. Have I ever tried underwater photography? I have not, but I've often thought about getting an underwater housing just for the water scenes that I shoot. I think it'd be so cool to have an underwater housing, but still have a tripod bracket on the bottom of the housing. That way I could shoot slightly longer exposures, push the tripod down and, like, literally get down in, like, just above water level in some of these water scenes. I think that would be so much fun. Let's see. Joel's actions are for Artisan Pro X 2022 and Quick Mask. I'll have to look that up. I know that there's quite a few different panels out there, and, like, Whereas Weatherby has one out, and Blake has one. Blake Rudis has one out. there's quite a few different ones. The ones that I tend to gravitate towards are the ones that specialize in the luminosity mask part of things, simply because a lot of those other panels do so much other stuff, and none of that stuff I really want in a panel, because I have all the hotkeys and action keys and those kind of things memorized, and I have my own process for Orton effects and sharpening and that kind of thing. So I don't really like those extra things that most of those panels have. So I tend to gravitate towards the panels that focus on luminosity masks. Hey, Nick, I hope you're well. I have a question. I have a laptop, M1 iPad Pro, which makes my work a little harder for editing because the iPad resolution. What's the question, though? Which one should you edit on? I would definitely say laptop. My question is, have you ever tried to connect my Wacom tablet to an iPad for editing? No, I have not. I have no idea if that would work. I have an iPad. Maybe I should try that. I'm not sure if that would work or not. It's a good question. Looking to pick up a couple of my courses. Any you'd recommend starting with? So that depends on your skill set. My kind of base, like Photoshop 101 course is Essential Photoshop for Landscape Photography. That's been out for a while, and it's kind of like my one that is designed to be purchased first, and then everything comes after that. So I have that. And then from there, you could either go mastering luminosity masks if you want to learn that stuff, dodging and burning. And then after those, then I would have advanced concepts. How long do I usually camp for a location? I remember in your podcast with Mark Adamus, he would do a month or more. Well, Mark Adamus is hardcore. And I typically don't have, because I've got a family and a kid, like I can't be gone for super long periods of time. So usually the way my trips work when they're for personal stuff is usually there's like a weather window that I want to hit. So let's say that, we have clear skies and it's a new moon and I want to go out for night photography. Like I have that like 3 or 4 day window that I'll go and camp. Or maybe it's, big surf on the coast. I'll go for that window of weather condition. But typically I don't get to go on, month-long personal trips simply because I have so many workshops scattered throughout my year that it gives me very small gaps in between those workshops. I try to do like one workshop a month or a little less than that, but it usually ends up like one commitment per month. And it doesn't leave me a lot of gaps in between for personal stuff, unfortunately. Nick, it'd be fantastic if I could make some videos about weather, how to properly read and use weather maps, which apps are most interesting, fog, high clouds, not to mention storms. Yeah, I think that's definitely something I'll do soon-ish, especially, there's so many different ways you could go with a video like that, especially like, predicting surf height, predicting tide heights, what's photogenic during those times. There's so many different ways I could go with that. Nick's Photoshop package changed my life. Not exaggerating. Well, thank you, John. That's what I was going for. Life-changing tutorials. That's my new marketing slogan. Drone or Sony 100 to 400? I go Sony 100 to 400 GM because that, first of all, that investment is going to last way longer and you can use it everywhere. A drone, can't use it everywhere. In fact, most places you can't use it. And most of the places you really wish you could use it, you won't be able to use it. You'll only be able to use it in the areas that you don't really even care to use it. And nobody's going to glare at you for using a telephoto lens. Do I see myself shooting more in Montana, Idaho? Yes. I absolutely love like the Bitter Roots and Hell's Canyon area, although I don't know what the new fires have done. Yeah, there's so much in Montana. Especially like, you guys have some pretty epic storms roll through in the summertime that I would like to get over there for. Do I ever do deep sky astrophotography? I have not yet. I do have a Skywatch Ranger, that what it is? I've got a star tracker that I should be able to put my 70 to 200 on. That's about as big a lens as I could probably put on there. I do want to do some, but I don't foresee myself ever getting super into it because like there's only so much you can do. And a lot of people have already done it way better than I could do it, you know? I mentioned that I'm not a fan of sky replacements, but do I ever do blue hour blends for a better foreground exposure? I do. I have, and I do sometimes, but it's usually like I don't do. There's a limit to it. Like I don't feel good about blending like a ISO 100 f16 blue hour shot, even if it is 30 seconds. I don't feel right about blending that with, you know, an ISO 2000 Milky Way. So what I'll typically do is like when the sky is still kind of a little too bright to shoot the Milky Way, then I'll start doing like my 3.5 minute long f8 exposures or something like that at ISO 400 or maybe even 800. But I don't do a lot of blue hour blends. It's just, I don't know. There's a lot of people that do it, and I feel like it's just not, I don't know. It feels like cheating. And I know it's probably not really, but it just kind of feels like cheating. So I would rather light paint personally, because I feel like a lot of times a light painted frame has more dimension and interest than a blue hour frame anyway. Blue hour foregrounds are pretty flat, right? And I prefer something with a little bit more dimension. And I like the challenge of trying to do it evenly. And I don't know. There's a lot of people that like Rachel Jones Ross. I'm forgetting her name right now. Rachel. She does awesome night photography, and she does a lot of twilight or blue hour blends, and it's awesome for her, but it's just not for me. Back to Banff for more shoots. I would like to be there in the fall. I've only been there in the wintertime, and it would be great to be there in the fall color. Which coast do I enjoy shooting more, or Washington or Oregon? Definitely Oregon. Washington, like the only good parts of the coast really are in the very south and the very north. I would definitely like to spend more time in some of the more remote beaches up by Olympic National Park. But for the most part, Oregon has the best coastline for sure. Was my recommendation for getting big wave photos as to location and time of year? So the time of year is usually going to be in the fall, winter, and really early spring, because that's when the big storms roll through. And the other thing to keep an eye out for is, it's usually just like I keep an eye on my surf apps and keep an eye on swell height. So the height of the waves is what matters. A lot of people get super excited about king tides. King tides mean nothing more than the tide is really high. Granted, when the tide is higher, it often gives those waves a little bit more room to develop closer to shore because it's deeper close to shore. So if you get a king tide and a big swell day, then you can have some really crazy, dramatic stuff. It's also really dangerous usually because they're reaching further inland. But you can have beautiful photography and really good opportunities with way smaller crowds if you're just there on a big surf day with a normal tide. It doesn't take a king tide. Would I ever do a trip and leave my tripod at home and just do handheld for a challenge? I think it would be super cool to see what I come up with. No. Because if I do a trip, I want to come away with good photos. And like, I know that I saw Gavin's video about like, can you tell if I used a tripod in this? And like, it's cool that you can shoot with lower quality and get away with it, but why would you want to do that? Like it's cool. I think that working within constraints can be a good thing when it comes to like, okay, today I'm going to focus on telephoto photography and I'm going to restrict myself to only that. But if you don't even take the gear to to do other types of photography, especially on a trip where you're spending money on, because let's face it, traveling right now is expensive. I feel like it's a needless exercise. Sure, I could take handheld images and most people wouldn't notice, but I would, because I'm the one that's zooming into 100% when I post process. And what happens if I get, the photo of a lifetime on this trip? What happens if I go to the coast and a water spout comes out at the same time as a rainbow and things just go crazy epic, and I really have the opportunity of my life and I can't get a great image because I don't have a tripod. And I end up shooting the image of my life at ISO 2000. Granted, I still captured the moment, good for me, but I could have done it better. That way, when I print it, I could have a higher quality image. I'm never going to purposely shoot with a lower quality just for just to say that I could. Just because other people can't notice doesn't mean that I won't. And so, I don't like that, just because, for the same reason that, I encourage people to, post-process in Photoshop, because it's better. Something to know about me. I'm an elitist. There, I said it. When I was into music, and when I was really serious about drumming, I only listened to the best drummers. I was super judgmental about drummers, and I hated listening to the radio because most of those drummers, I was better than them. There's nothing worse than listening to some stupid, radio rock band and knowing that they're a millionaire and I'm not, and I'm better than them. But I don't know. If you want to be the best at something, you have to, I don't know. What's the best way to put it? I don't know. I'm an elitist. And so I'm always going for ultimate quality. Yeah. I've struggled miserably with light painting. Have I ever done tutorials on that to focus on that? It seems fun, but I'm terrible at it. Dude, it's challenging. That's part of the fun of it, is trying to do it well and tastefully. One of the biggest things is how you choose to bring it into the frame in post-processing. So just bringing in just enough to open the shadows, but keeping the white balance realistic and keeping the brightness of it within reason. If it's a night scene, the shadows and the foreground should be dark and the night should be the brightest thing, or the stars should be the brightest thing. And that's true even when you light paint. You just want just enough to where it's opening the shadows a bit and there's detail. And the trick is to have them dark enough, but to have them low contrast enough to where the areas that are not getting hit with the light are not just, pitch black. So a lot of times you have to decrease the contrast before changing the blend mode of that layer to lighten. Okay. I think I'm done ranting. I've probably dug myself enough holes and pissed enough people off. I'm sorry that I'm an elitist, but I am. And yeah, I always want to go into every shoot like it could be the one that I get my, the image of my career at. I always want to be prepared just in case. And I would always rather capture something in the best possible way than to be shoot it in the not best possible way just for the hell of it. That's why I shoot digital and I don't shoot film. And I guess that's why, when people purposely go out and shoot handheld landscape photography, it's cool as long as you're shooting bright scenes. But what happens if you want to drag the shutter, or what happens if it gets really dark, Anyway, I hope that you're all well. Thanks for hanging out with me for this, however long it's been, an hour. And I guess I'll catch you in the next one. So thank you guys so much. We'll catch you later. Bye-bye.